Another day, another embarrassment to the United States around the world by Donald Trump. Yesterday, the United States became the single, solitary, only country not to sign on to the Paris Climate Agreement. And the backstory of this is that shortly after becoming president of the United States, Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the Paris climate deal was several months ago. This is an agreement that is meant to fight greenhouse gas emissions and try to limit global warming to only 2 degrees Celsius by 2050. And yesterday we learned that Syria has signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement, which now leaves the United States as the only country that is not going to be signing on to the Paris climate deal. At first, when Trump pulled out, Nicaragua and Syria were also staying out of the deal, so the United States was one of the 3 countries. Now the United States is the only country. Syria got in yesterday. Nicaragua initially did not want to be a part of it, but because they felt that the deal didn't do enough to limit emissions and pollution. But eventually they realized, hey, it's better than nothing, so we are going to sign on to it. How do you justify this, right? I mean, is this American exceptionalism of some kind? How do you see this as an American and think it's good that the United States is the one country that's not going to be a part of this deal? There's 2 ways that I see to rationalize this, right? One would be the U.S. is smarter than every other country. In other words, we've somehow figured out in the U.S., or Trump has figured out, which is almost delusional to believe, we've figured out in the U.S. something that no other country has figured out about why signing on to this deal would be a bad idea. The other possibility is the U.S. is so different from every other country in the world that while it might be fine for all those other countries to sign on to the Paris climate deal, it would not be in the American best interests to sign on to the Paris climate deal. At least explain the rationale, because the truth is that neither of those ideas are actually true. And I was kind of shocked that Trump didn't have the respect and decency to just sign on to it and then ignore it, kind of like he's doing with Russian sanctions, right? It wouldn't be a new thing for Trump to publicly or on paper do what looks better, but then just not do it in the end. Because the truth is that this is a very general agreement to try to limit global temperatures from increasing more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, which would require pretty significant changes from every country that is involved here. And of course, the target date is 2050, right? So Trump could sign on to this. He's not going to be president for most of the time that you would actually have to make the changes to hit this target by 2050. The agreement doesn't even tell each country how they're supposed to do this, but it says, hey, each country can come up with their own plan for how to do this. So why isn't Trump doing it? Well, optics. I think Trump sees himself as the tough guy who's not going to be bullied on this climate pansy nonsense by other European socialists like Emmanuel Macron or whoever, right? I mean, crazy. Of course, he's not a socialist. Trump does want to roll back a bunch of Obama regulations, like, for example, the Clean Power Plan, which would have reduced carbon emissions by 2030 to 32% lower than in 2005. Trump wants more coal, right? He's been very adamant about trying to breathe life into an industry that is naturally dying in the United States. So those are some of the reasons Trump is opposed to this. There is some good news hidden in this, or not really in it, but kind of around it, which is that a bunch of states and cities in the US have said, we're going to carry out our plans as if the United States were in the Paris Climate Agreement. California is making major strides in wind and solar and geothermal. Iowa is now getting 35% of its energy from wind. Washington State is getting a majority of electricity from hydroelectric. And I know hydroelectric is not renewable in a sense, in the same sense that wind and solar are renewable, but still electric is better than coal, for example. And even Texas is seeing more wind power generation, which they should, right? Texas has these huge open plains where there is significant potential for wind power generation. And of course, Texas is seen as oil country in many ways, but even Texas is generating more and more electricity, more and more power from wind, which is great. And at the sort of company level, sounds like they're bowling upstairs today. At the company level, we have many companies going green because it's good for business, right? It's more economically viable to go green every single year. And not a big surprise, but we also learned yesterday, this is so funny, Trump is not going to be invited to the climate change summit being held in France later this year. And why would he be, right? What would Trump's presence at a climate change summit do? The guy is a denier, and he heads the one country that is not going to be part of the Paris climate agreements. His presence would be a distraction. It would distract or hold back productive discussions. And that's where this becomes the issue, right? Because even though Trumpists think that this is all great, the Europeans are sissies, who cares if Trump isn't invited to play in their sandbox? The reputation of the United States around the world is being destroyed because whatever the Trumpists say about screw them and Trump's not going to be pushed around, he doesn't want to be there anyway, we are moving towards a world where when you want to have a serious conversation about important issues like, for example, climate change or green energy, you don't even invite the president of the United States. And that is an embarrassment for the United States, period, whether the Trumpists ever see it or acknowledge it, whether Donald Trump ever sees it or acknowledges it. The fact that the United States and the president of the United States need not even be invited to the serious big boy table discussions about major issues is a major change from when President Obama was president of the United States. What's next? Liberia and Burma will adopt the metric system and leave the U.S. as the one country using our system. We are the only country that has decided, for a combination of harebrained and fact-free reasons, to say we are not going to be part of the Paris Climate Agreement. It is pathetic, it is embarrassing, and it is impacting the United States around the world already. Discuss this with us on our Reddit discussion forum at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. We'll take a break and be joined by Luke Vargas from Seoul, South Korea, who's been traveling with the president. Well, he's been following the president around. Well, I don't even want to say that. That makes it sound worse than it is. He is part of the media group that is with the president in terms of the countries the president is visiting. Anyway, it's very late in South Korea, and Luke will join us after the break. Today's episode of The David Pakman Show is made possible in part by Warby Parker eyeglasses. Warby Parker recently did the right thing and ditched advertising on right-wing conspiracy website Breitbart, pulling their ads off. And you can get the free 5-day home try-on from Warby Parker. Check out their glasses. I use them when I'm not wearing contact lenses. I started with the free at-home trial. They send you 5 pairs of glasses. You see which ones you like. You send them back, and whichever one you pick, they will put your prescription into. I like this because I can actually show the glasses to other people and not have to just decide on the spot like in an eyeglass store. The eyeglass industry is controlled by very few corporations that keep the prices very, very high, even over $300 for prescription glasses. With Warby Parker, they start at just $95. Mine costs that, including lenses. And for every pair sold, they give a pair to someone in need. So to try the 5 pairs and support the David Pakman Show, go to warbyparkertrial.com/TDPS.